There are so many interesting stories about Birmingham. There are entrepreneurs, there are nonprofit leaders, there are community leaders, there are students, there are business leaders who are doing very interesting things. And my vision for this podcast would be, it would be a platform for them to tell their stories in an efficient way, not just for our local community, but hopefully it breaks through nationally so folks know that Birmingham is big enough to matter, small enough to move. And there are so many interesting things here where you can partner, where you can invest, and where you can help grow a city.
Hi, I'm Angela Abdul-Rashid, the host of the Prosper Connector podcast. We're the place where information is shared, connections are made, and great Birmingham stories are told by great Birmingham people. Today, we have an amazing Birmingham leader with us today, J.W. Carpenter, president of Prosper, our fearless leader. Thank you so much for joining us for the inaugural episode of the Prosper Connector.
Angela, thank you so much. But you will promise me the guests will get better from here?
I cannot make promises.
Okay, they have to get better.
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Why are we here, JW? What is this all about? Why in the world did Prosper say in the world of podcast, there needs to be another one?
Well, the truth is that if you look at podcast technology, it's very new. There aren't that many out there. And so we really want to be on the front leading edge of that. Except the exact opposite. There are tons of podcasts out there. But what we need more of, I think, or the opportunity we have here, is there are so many interesting stories about Birmingham. There are entrepreneurs, there are nonprofit leaders, there are community leaders, there are students, there are business leaders who are doing very interesting things. And I want this podcast, and my vision for this podcast would be, it would be a platform for them to tell their stories in an efficient way, not just for our local community, but hopefully it breaks through nationally so folks know that Birmingham is big enough to matter, small enough to move. And there are so many interesting things here where you can partner, where you can invest, and where you can help grow a city.
The podcast is done. Just
great. This is
so
terrific.
you said something, and I love hearing you say that Birmingham is big enough
to matter, small enough to move. Yes.
So one of the ways that we are moving is through the work that we do at Prosper.
Yep.
Let's give the people a little bit about who we are and what we do and why we do this work that we get to do.
Okay, there were several questions in there. I'm going to try and answer
Take them all.
All right, very good. So our vision is to build the most thriving and inclusive economy in the Southeast. Now that is really big, right? So what is our specific role? I think of our role in two ways. First is, how do we have an aligned, inclusive, measurable, and funded job creation, job preparation, and job access strategy? How are we making sure that we're growing jobs, preparing our residents for jobs, and attracting talent to fill those jobs? And we're removing the barriers that are keeping people out of the workforce. Now, we are not doers. Angela and I have been practitioners for most of our careers. We're not practitioners anymore. We want to make sure that the practitioners in all of those areas, job creation, job preparation, and job access, that what they're doing is aligned toward a common goal, that they have the collaboration that they need, they have the funding they need, and that what they're doing is truly inclusive holistically with a specific focus on race and gender. Our origin story, there are other people who can tell it better, and hopefully if we do it right, we'll tell it better as part of this podcast, but it was in the wake of George Floyd that city leaders like Mayor Woodfin, like Dr. Watts, like our corporate leaders came together and said enough is enough. We've got to come together and work collectively to make sure that we are growing this city and growing it for all of our residents, specifically our Black residents and women residents. And the second thing that Prosper is doing, in addition to that aligned, inclusive, measurable, and funded strategy, is how do we get Birmingham's name out there? Yeah. How do we make sure that we are telling the story of Birmingham collectively with the community so that we are getting the best ideas, we are getting the best initiatives, we are getting some of the best people and some of the best investors to make a bet on Birmingham, to realize they can grow here, that they can do good work here, that this is the best version of America, to quote my non-cousin Josh Carpenter, has a great Birmingham in it. And we'll have a great Birmingham when we invest in our local leaders, and we bring in the best ideas and funding to this community.
So I have heard you, again, say this for almost 3 years now.
Okay.
I do not tire of hearing this. But here's one question I've always wanted to ask you. Why do you care?
So I care for a lot of different reasons. I'm a 6 foot tall, straight white male from a high income background. That is my identity. It comes with me whether I want it or not. And that identity has given me an immense amount of privilege. And my work, most of my career has been spent working with students. And I get most of my energy from working with young people. They have limitless potential. They're always teaching you things. Anyone who lacks hope for this world, spend 5 or 10 minutes with young people. And if you still don't have hope, I don't know what to do with you, okay? But the main difference between me and a lot of those students, many of whom grew up in back-breaking poverty and are discriminated against because of their race and their gender, still today, which is absurd and true. The main difference for me is not ability. It is margin for error. Mine is wide and theirs is thin. I watched many of the students when I was a teacher, when I was working at the Ed Foundation, do everything right and still not come out the other end. Meanwhile, I saw people who had my privilege, who did a lot of things wrong and still ended up on the other end because their margin for error was so wide. So wide. Mm-hmm. And so now I've taken on the most important role in my entire life. I'm a parent. I got a 9-year-old as of today. I got an 11-year-old as of next month. And I want to make sure that the opportunities that their peers have are no different than theirs. They're the opportunities they get. And the only way to do that is to get your hands dirty. Mm-hmm. And I have spent my career, and I hope to continue to spend my career, getting my hands dirty and trying to make sure that we are expanding opportunities for everyone in this city. It is a moral commitment, and our soul will be rendered until such time as everyone has those opportunities. Now, that's the moral case. Strategically, guys, the majority of our county are women and black people. If they're not growing, we're not growing, period. And I will say, in terms of commitment to diversity, the jury is out. Our young people value it. They see it as a feature, not a bug. And if this is a city where diverse people cannot get opportunities, cannot grow their families, guess what? Everybody is gone. My kids will graduate high school, they will walk out the door, and they will not come back. We suffer from some of that today because of the reputation we have nationally, which I do not think is accurate for who we are today, but we dug our own hole there. So how do we undig it? The way we undig it is to tell the story of this city now, of innovative leaders like Mayor Woodfin, but it's also about doing better and creating more opportunities. And if I can be a small piece of that as part of this excellent team with Angela and others, as part of a larger team of innovative companies and organizations and people, well, that's a pretty good way to spend my time. I find a lot of joy in this work, and I also have to find urgency in this work to make sure that I am doing everything I can every single day to move the ball forward.
And you are. And you highlighted the fact that we get to do this work. It's a team of 6, but it's not just us. There are some amazing partners that help just push our work ahead. Talk about the importance of partnership and collaboration and why that's such a part of our fabric as an organization.
So big picture wise, I want to think about partnership, right? So when I first started doing this work, I was, I guess, a little earlier on my privilege journey. And I would say that while I don't think my intentions were not bad, a lot of the times I would do things to and for communities. I would show up and I've got all these great ideas, and why aren't people listening to me? And when they listen to me, it's like, well, maybe they just don't get it, right? And two things can be true at once. Sometimes I did have good ideas, not a lot of the time, but sometimes. But the truth is that unless you work with people and you spend time using your ears and mouth in proportion, which I am demonstrating the opposite of during this podcast, and you really spend time getting to know and build relationships with the community, it doesn't matter how good your idea is. It does not matter. It is not sustainable and it is not moral. Don't do it. So when we're building partnerships at Prosper, first and foremost, I want to make sure we're working with people. And to the extent that we're not, we need to do better. And if we're not doing that, it probably is it's definitely my responsibility. It's probably my fault a lot of the time. But the other thing is, we are not an executing organization. So we need these partnerships. So we're fortunate when we're working on the Health Tech Accelerator that we have Generator, a national organization that focuses on not just growing great companies through accelerators, but investing in those companies. They're an unbelievable partner of ours. We're happy to be part of their story in Alabama. When we're working on growing Black-owned businesses, we are lucky to have Kendra Key at Regions. We are lucky to have Nyla Jackson at the Birmingham Business Alliance, helping us make sure that we are supporting and growing those organizations. When we're trying to grow the next generation of talent, which means investing in our best natural resource, which will now and forever be our young people. We are lucky to have Samantha Williams in the Birmingham Promise. Those are just 2 or 3 examples of so many. And Angela, you have done a great job cultivating grassroots partnerships, of the partnerships that are necessary, not just for Prosper to be successful, but for our city and our county to be successful.
So one thing you've been doing with those successes, and we want to always pause to honor the work that is being accomplished, as we also acknowledge work that still needs to be done. But you have done a phenomenal job in leading Prosper and galvanizing others to take this work and share it on national platforms that I, in my decades of nonprofit work, have just never seen before. Why does it matter that you get out of Birmingham to take Birmingham other places?
So I think you've done a pretty good job of telling Birmingham's story. And one day I'm going to sit there and interview you, and then you'll be in the hot seat.
Anytime.
Yeah.
But right now it's me, so go.
Fair enough. Are we on camera?
We
so
are.
Anyway,
It's live.
And you want long answers, right? Because people like to hear that. Somebody just bellowing on.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. So number one, there are two things, again, are true at once. You hear me say that a lot. I got it from a guy named David French, who I think is a really, really good writer and thinker. There are so many innovators here with great ideas who are not getting the support they need. And that is especially true around race and gender. It is just true. And we need to be supporting and helping to grow those ideas. Here's the second thing that's true. Most of the good ideas have the same thing in common. They are not mine, and they are not ours. And they originated outside the borders of the city of Birmingham and outside Alabama.
Yeah.
That's just because there are a whole lot of people outside of those borders who are thinking about great things. Well, Birmingham isn't always on their radar. Or if it's on their radar, maybe they got a negative impression of it. How do we make sure that they know that this city can be a place where they can grow their ideas? That's what's so exciting about the Health Tech Accelerator, to bring in these innovators from all over the country in partnership with Generator and watch them grow, fall in love with Birmingham and watch them grow their businesses here. But the second thing that's really important is this. You know, national philanthropy drives a lot of this work, not just our work, but work across the ecosystem. You know where 3% of national philanthropy lands? The Southeast in the United States. And my wager is we're not at the front of the line. My wager is New Orleans, Nashville, Atlanta, and Charlotte are ahead of us. And if people include Houston, which is not in the Southeast, but whatever, some people consider it.
That's debatable.
You know, they're probably ahead of us too. We need to get more of that money here. And I think about this, I am not a civil rights leader. I do not have the moral credibility. I don't have the strength or the fortitude. But if you study the civil rights movement, which you live in Birmingham, those are the greatest innovators we've ever had. The greatest innovators we ever had did not start companies. They were pastors, they were students, they were civil rights leaders who stood up against the single best public-private partnership in the history of the world to deny them every opportunity. And against those odds, they won. And our work is the last part of that.
Right.
Is to make, they never got the opportunities they deserve. And if we do it now, aligning the entire city around creating opportunities over the long run, which is where we're at right now, that's how we win. But if you interview those innovators, if you think about all of the good work that was done by Fred Shuttlesworth, by Ralph Abernathy, by Martin Luther King, by so many others, so much of that was because of outside support too. It was their moral credibility. It was their proximity to the problem. It was their ability to organize, but it was funding from outside. How many times did Harry Belafonte write a check? Right? How many times did outside folks come in to support them? Not to take over for them, not to tell them what to do. Imagine if we can bring some of that philanthropic initiative, some of that outside capital, some of that outside investment to invest in current leaders and current organizations, not Prosper. We don't want your money. We want you to invest in those leaders today. When you do that and we combine them with great ideas from the outside, great innovation and more credibility here, now we're cooking with gas.
Right. And then
that's why it's important to tell the story.
Well, I was going to say, and then we go up against some of those cities that you called, and people will put Birmingham in the same category as the Nashvilles, Atlantas, Charlottes, et cetera.
100%. And I always want to be in a position of learning. There's so much for us to learn from other cities and other people. But we have some things to share too.
Right.
And we have some good work that we're doing here too. And when I find, as I found myself last week on the national stage with a bunch of leaders from this community, including Mayor Woodfin, I found we were not out of place.
Yeah. We belong.
We belong.
Okay, so I have one more question.
Okay, and then we do the freestyle rapping.
And then I have another question.
Okay, so that first thing was a lie.
No, well,
okay,
whatever
fair
you
enough.
like to call it. This last question. So what is next? What do you see? What do you want? What will you do? What do you want to do? You can answer one or all of those.
And that's for Prosper?
For Prosper, for Birmingham, for this podcast. What's next?
What I hope for this podcast is number one, we get some more interesting guests. Okay, we've got to have some people who've done some
interesting things. It only gets
things.
better from here. You're like the foundation.
I was going to say, if it gets worse from here, that would almost be more exciting because I don't know how you do it. But I want to make sure this podcast breaks through, and not for any other reason that there are so many people here in Birmingham and people in smaller flyover cities and rural areas all over this country who are not getting the attention they deserve, who are not getting their stories out there. And if this podcast can be a conduit for that, that would be my hope. Because what I found, and I've learned this a lot from you, Angela, when you tell stories, when you listen to other people's stories, the sky's the limit. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah. You never know whose ears this is, or I guess eyes.
Eyes and ears.
I found out we were filming this morning.
This is live.
As far as I was concerned, I was tricked. You don't know who is going to see this or hear this and want to do something with that person, with that idea, with this city. That, to me, is what's incredibly exciting. And so as I look 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years in the future, what I want to see, I want to see a lot of things. Certainly, I want to see median income increasing. I want to see median income increasing for everybody, not just in the aggregate, but for Black-led households, for women-led households. Certainly, I'll be looking at data. But what I also want to see is I want to see Birmingham get on the radar, and get on the radar because people are recognizing the good work going on, and we're continuing to collaborate with the best thinkers, the best investors, the best ideas, the best initiatives to make Birmingham a stronger and better place for everybody.
We can do it.
We're already doing it in a lot of different ways, and we're going to continue to do it and continue to grow. And we've just got to stay strong and recognize that what we're trying to undo is 400 plus years. We're not going to wrap it up by December of this year. We're not going to wrap it up by 2025. This is tombstone work. If on my tombstone it says we won, that feels real fast.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to get to engage and do this work, recognizing that we've got to celebrate the incremental wins as we seek the transformational gains. And I believe that we can absolutely get there if we stay strong, if we stay committed, if we stay together.
Okay, last official question.
Okay, that's probably not true.
Which should have been the first one. I messed
probably
up.
Not
this is
true.
The first episode.
You didn't mess
This
up.
is it. I did.
You're doing great, Angela.
So my first question should have been, if Birmingham were a food,
yes,
what would it be and why?
If Birmingham were a food, I feel like this is the number one thing people associate with us in the positive, that we've got a bunch of food here. And if you come here, you will eat well.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I would say is, if Birmingham were a food, we would be any fish dish at Nikki's West, because it was cooked with love by our community. And if you don't order quick, you're going to miss it.
I love it.
So when you come here, if you want, we can give you first-class James Beard award-winning food, and that is authentic. But we got to get you to Nikki's West, because that's where the community meets and eats.
Absolutely. Lunch later? Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm hungry. That's why I'm glad you asked that. What happens now?
Well, I say thank you.
Okay, and I say you're welcome, and I say thank you to you. Angela just nominated for Nonprofit Leader of the Year by the Minority Business Awards.
I did.
And you just got top 50 under 50?
I did.
Excellent.
That
and those are just two.
I'm old.
It's not old. You'll be one of the youngest people. You'll be one of the youngest people in that room.
I'll take it.
And Angela and I work with 3 people, 25 and under, who we really like, except that they're 25 and under, and it reminds us that Father Time is undefeated.
Yep. JW, thank you.
Oh, Angela, thank you. It is always a pleasure to be with you, and I am, as always, much better because we've known each other for so long, and it's been a real privilege to get to work with you and continue to work with you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you for being the first guest on the first of many Prosper podcasts.
Excellent.
Yeah, great job.